Good morning. Well, you've joined me today at Hallcroft Fisheries, and to be honest with you, I'm absolutely loving it. We're doing something quite different today. We're fishing a conventional feeder setup because they're the fishery rules. Not allowed to use a method feeder, and we're fishing it tight across to the adjacent platform. And we're having an absolutely fantastic day's fishing. I'm getting a carp every single drop. Now what I want to do today during the video is I want to go through my whole setup for this kind of situation. Whether you're fishing a method feeder or a conventional feeder, using the balanced tackle for these kind of fish that we're targeting today is really important. So I'm going to run through the tackle that I'm using, the setup, the rig, what I'm going to be using, the hook lengths, the hook, the bait choice, the hook bait choice, and how I'm going to be feeding the actual peg. So hopefully you're going to gain a lot of key information for you to put to use on your local venue. And we're catching some really big fish today. This is a lovely fish. So let's see what it is. Beauty about this venue is they really do fight hard, and so you've got to use quite strong gear. And as well as that, there's some really big fish in this lake, massive fish, well over 20 pounds. As you can see, this one doesn't want to come in. To me, there's nothing more enjoyable this style of fishing. One rod works so well. Sit on it, keep feeding it, and eventually they'll come, because in theory what we're doing is we've turned the far bank area into our margin line, almost as if we're fishing down to the next platform with a pole. The same principle, but the fish obviously feel a lot safer across there because there's no disturbance. So it's only 11 o'clock in the morning and we're catching a fish a chuck because the fish feel so safe to feed on the other bank next to the platform where they're not getting disturbed. As well as that, on here, it's one of the few venues where you're actually allowed to use the meat. And I'm not putting any meat through the feeder, I'm just feeding pellets and ground bait, but I'm using meat on the hook. And up to now, I've not had to swap hook baits because it's working really, really well. Just a 10mm piece of meat. This is a nice fish. A punched 10mm piece of meat. And we're catching really well on it. Oh, it's a ghosty. That's a nice fish. It's always the ghosties that seem to fight that little bit harder than your average carp. Come on, son. Don't be so angry. Come to Nicky. I think he's nearly ready now. There we go. In we come. Slip him in. Look at that. Now that is a beauty. It's not massive, but that is in fantastic condition. Take the cheeky little hook out. Hopefully he'll behave. Look at that. Fantastic. This is what it's all about. Catching loads of fish like this during the summertime. Beautiful. Right, let me talk to you about the setup that I'm using. Once I've unhooked this little beauty. To me, it's the most important thing. Using the right rod, the right reel, the correct main line. Then of course using the right terminal tackle setup at the bottom. So for a start, we're fishing, it's about 45 metres to the other bank. For that reason, I could use a 10-foot, but I'm using an 11-foot Shimano Speedmaster. Simply because the 11-foot allows me to give me that extra power and control in the cast That enables me to be more accurate, especially when I really want to target around that platform where I know it's a lovely clean bottom. I want to make every cast count. And that's going to help me catch more fish, especially in match conditions. Also then I've got that power in the butt with an 11-foot rod to get in control of that fish when it's under my feet, and that'll help me stay in control of the fish and land the fish quicker. Line wise, I'm using 022 Shimano X-Age direct. Nice, strong, robust line. It's not going to let me down, and that's the most important thing. Use a line that you're confident with. Now let's talk about the end bit now. I'm using one of the Feederland feeders. It's a 40-gram feeder, cage feeder, free running. Now, to be honest with you, I love these feeders because they're so smooth. The design of them is brilliant. Nice heavy lead as well. We're fishing on a shelf. We're fishing tight against the island, tight against the platform. We're fishing on quite an acute shelf. So we need a reasonable amount of lead in order to hold that hold that feeder in place on the bottom next to the platform. That's going to minimise that feeder moving down the shelf when fish are feeding around that feeder, moving the line, touching the feeder. I'm using it in quite a large size because I want to keep that bait going in. I want to keep those fish interested. I want to get them competing for bait. So I'm using quite a large feeder. I've got a twizzle boom here, and what I'll do is I'll show you how to set that up. It's quite an effective setup. As you can see, I've got just a very simple setup. 2 number 8 starts, a twizzle boom, and then I've connected my hook length to it, and it's 12 inches from the feeder to the hook, and that's the minimum hook length you're allowed. Of course, with this kind of situation, I want to minimise the length of my hook length. I don't want it any longer, because the longer you have it, the more chance you have of foul looking fish, or they've picked the bait up, not set the hook. You need that hooking principle against that feeder. So that is the setup. Very simple. And then at the end, I've got quite a long hair. That enables me to use several varieties of baits. Today I'm using the F1 Sweet durable hookers in the 6mm, so I'm putting 2 of those on. And I'm also using some punched meat, which I've done in red krill, and I've got some natural punch meat as well, but the red krill is definitely catching a lot more fish today. And that's it really. Nice big hook as well, a size 12 hook, 0.18 hook length. And as I say, that hair enables me to swap and change my hook baits. Fish will be very picky sometimes and just have a few hook bait choices, sweet corn, pellets, bit of meat if you're allowed to use it, to sort out what the fish want, not necessarily what you want to catch the fish on, what the fish want. That's really important. So that's it really. Right, let's talk about how to set up a twizzle boom. What I love about this setup, it's so simple and quick to set up. No messing about, it's just purely a little bit of shot and your line itself, and that is it. So, get a feeder. Let's pretend this is attached to my rod. Thread it through the swivel. To be honest with you, I use this setup whether I'm natural fishing. Sometimes I use a helicopter rig when I'm natural fishing, but this is the most versatile setup for natural fishing when you're bream fishing, roach fishing, or when you're on a commercial like what we are today. Just an all-round setup, very simple. So, first of all, we've threaded it through the swivel link. I'm then going to make a very small loop at the end. So I'm going to do a figure of 8 knot like so. Okay, small figure of 8 knot. That is for doing a loop-to-loop connection from the hook lengths. And now I'm going to twizzle my line. Now, in order to twizzle your line, all it is create a nice bit of slack line like that, and I want to twist with my thumb and my finger. Like so. As you can see, I'm keeping that one still, just holding the line, pinch it, stop it unraveling, twizzle again. You can see it all twizzling up nice and tight, and that is going to act like a lovely little boom coming off the feeder. I form a loop like so. Once I've got the boom, a length boom that I want. On a commercial, I use a short one, and maybe on a natural water I might use a longer boom to ensure that my hook length is away from the feeder all the time. It's not going to get tangled. Through the loop 4 times, 3 times, sorry, I'm losing count, 4 times. So I've wrapped it through 4 times. As with all knots, give it a nice wet, pull it tight, like so. Trim the knot down, and then I put 2 number 8 stops on. That's all you need. And what's going to happen is the swivel part, the swivel part of the swivel link will sit against the stots and kick the actual boom out sideways. So let's just thread that back through. Pretend that's attached to the main line, like that. As you can see, it stands away from the feeder, whatever feeder you're going to be using. And then we've got a loop at the end, nice big loop that you can see, easy for you to do a loop-to-loop connection for your hook lengths. But that is so effective. In a way, what's happening as well, it's protecting your hook length. So no matter what diameter line you're using, whether you're on a commercial, obviously using thicker lines, on a natural water, you're getting away trying to use thinner hook lengths for skimmers and roach. That is going to protect your hook length, and it's going to work, and you'll know that when your feeder's on the bottom, everything's intact and you're all ready for a bite. In we come. Look at that for a beautiful fish. Hard fighting, beautiful common carp. Take the hook out. Look at that. What a beautiful fish. Right, let's talk about the bait now. Quite a simple approach, really. I don't want to confuse myself or the fish, and that's really important. So what I'm doing is, as I've said, I'm alternating between the hook baits, which is a durable expanders, and meat, punch meat, natural and krill. But the feed's as important. So what I've got is, in this tub here, I've got, I suppose it's a bit based on my method mix, and I've mixed it exactly the same as my method mix. As you can see, it's quite dry. I don't want it really stodgy, I want it quite dry. That allows me to be versatile on how I want it to work out of my feeder. So let's just get a feed here. I can either compact it like this. If I'm getting loads of fish, I want to compact it really hard. So what's happening is, it might not even actually come out of the feeder. That's adding extra weight to my feeder. So that's decreasing the chance of the feeder moving on the bottom, because obviously the feeder weighs more with bait in than without. And it's also forcing the fish to actually take my hook bait first, because there's less choice for the fish. And that's the beauty about this mix. So what I've got here is black swim stim and the swim stim feeder formula, and you can see just by getting the amounts right, it ends up being quite a dark mix, and you see it's perfect. And fish just absolutely love that feeder formula, and I use it a lot of the time when I'm method feeder fishing, adding to my, I'd say my trademark mix, which is swim stim and marine halibut. I've also added to it some fishery 2mm pellets as well, and that's it. All I'm doing is I'm feeding ground bait and micro pellets. What happens is the fish, you know, there doesn't seem to be a lot of bait there, but those pellets will keep them fish in the swim rooting about for ages. And then of course over the top of my bait, I'm presenting a nice big hook bait for them to pick out. So it's in a way, it's a contrast bait. What I don't want to be doing is adding loads of particles into my mix. I don't want to give the fish too much choice. I want my hook bait to stand out and they're going to pick it out quicker. So that's it really, a nice simple approach, but very, very effective. Let me just unhook this little sweetheart and I'll talk to you about feeder choices. To me it's really important, especially with open end feeders as well as method feeders. So I've wanted to bait the far bank up today, so I've used quite a large baiting feeder. Now, nice big heavy feeder as well. Don't forget, when you're baiting up, using a lighter feeder in weight is better, because obviously you're putting that much bait in, it's adding that extra weight anyway. So I've used a 30 gram in that, the large frame. They're perfect for baiting up medium amounts of bait. So I've had quite a few casts with that earlier on to get a good bed down. The same principle as when you're margin fishing on the pole. You want to put a few pots of ground bait in to kick your peg off, get them fish interested, competing in that shallow water, make them feel safe. I've done exactly the same principle with that. And then I've swapped to a 5-bar cage, and that's been a lovely, it's still a big feeder, still getting loads of bait in, but it's just right for me to be able to cast against that far bank, be accurate, but still at the same time put a nice amount of feed out as well. Now, this is the interesting thing. I've also, when I've caught a lot of fish and I'm catching a run of fish, I've gone to a smaller feeder with a lip on the inside. So it's a bottom loaded feeder. These are all feeder lamb feeders, they're brilliant. And it's actually preventing that bait from emptying as quick as a side lead feeder. And so, as I said earlier on, it's forcing those fish to take your hook bait quicker. So when you're catching a lot of fish, you can still get away actually using the same size feeder, but as long as it's got a ridge on the middle, that's really preventing that bait from emptying out quickly. So it's forcing the fish to take your hook bait. So that's a good tip. So always carry with you a choice of feeders for you to swap and change and get the right feeder working on the day. Right, let's talk about the casting. Now, to me, it's the most important part, and it's an area I see a lot of people struggle with. So hopefully what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through the process, how I cast, how I try to be as accurate as I possibly can, and all it's a case of is following in the steps and going out and giving it a practice and just trying to improve in your casting accuracy. To me, it's so important. If you want to build up an area in a tight area, you've got to ensure that the majority of your casts are in that area, and that's how you're going to quickly build up a large amount of bait in a small area for whatever style of fishing you're doing, whether it's method feeder up to an island, open water bream fishing. It's going to help you catch more fish, and in match conditions going to help you put more fish in the net and win more matches. So for a start, as I've already mentioned, the weight of the feeder is really important. Today we're fishing 45 metres, as I've mentioned. We've got a crosswind. There's lots of variables to consider, and I want to use a heavy feeder to ensure that when I hit my clip, the feeder's landing accurately. What I don't want to be doing is using a lighter feeder, hitting the clip, and it's causing a bow in the line, and it means that a lot of your casts won't be on target. In this kind of situations, and especially if the wind was stronger, I might even use a 50 gram or a 55 gram to ensure that I'm being accurate, I'm hitting my clip, and I'm putting that feeder in the same area more or less every single cast. So the casting action is very important. So one thing I always want to do is when I cast, especially these kind of distances, I want to stand up, because that is how you get in the full action of your body and the compression of the rod, and it'll help you become more accurate. So for a start, what I want to do is I want to create a pendulum, because as you can see there, I've got 3 foot between my rod tip and my feeder. Now that means that as I compress the rod, I'm using this area. This part of the rod's really important. This is your accurate part. This is where the power comes from, and this is how you become accurate, by using this part of the rod to cast with. And by using a pendulum enables that area of the rod to be used. And if you notice, when I cast out, there's no whipping noise. That's because I'm using the power part of the rod. You hear a lot of anglers when they cast out, you hear a whoosh. And that is because they're casting with a feeder too near the end of the rod, and they're using the top part of the rod, which is your playing action, not your casting action. So by having a pendulum enables you to become more accurate and become a smoother and more accurate caster. So for a start, I resemble it as a bow and arrow. I'm looking at my marker, which is slightly to the right of the platform. I'm getting everything ready, and then all it's a case of is bringing your feeder back nice and smooth, and then you're getting the full nice compression of the rod. If you bring your feeder back too quickly, it bounces, you lose that accuracy and you lose the power in the cast. So I stand straight, I'm looking at the marker down the end of my rod. I bring the feeder back nice and slow, cast it out, there. So I've landed right next to the banking, slightly to the right of the platform where I've been basing up. Now this is the important part. When I've cast it out, I've held my rod and hit my clip at 12 or 11 o'clock. That's allowing that extra line, which is really important, especially when you're carp fishing. So what I've done is I've just closed my bail arm. What I'm not going to do is I'm going to reel that line in. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to sink my line first. Now, hitting your clip at 12 or 11 o'clock is really important because it allows you, it's that extra cushion of line on your spool. If you hook a big fish and it wants to take for your run, you've got that cushion, you've got that extra line to play that fish on if it wants to run without having to take your clip off. That clip is my accuracy marker. So, once the line's sunk, which it has now, I then put my rod on the rest. What I don't want to do is I do not want to move that feeder because I'm fishing on quite an acute shelf. I want that feeder tight against the banking where the fish are patrolling and looking for food. If I move that feeder down the shelf, I'm fishing in the wrong depth of water. So now I've got my feeder where I've landed it, I've sunk my line. My next process is to slowly tighten that line up. Look at that, got a fish on. Absolutely. You couldn't write that, could you? But that is the beauty about it. It's not, you see a lot of people, they think that tightening that line up quickly, getting a bend in your rod is going to help hook the fish. It's nothing to do with that. It's the weight of the feeder, the hook setting the feeder setting the hook in the mouth. Your tip is just an indicator. That's all it is on commercial situations. And by doing it that way, I'm being accurate, not necessarily with landing it in the same spot every single time, but I'm at the correct depth. If I'd have tightened that feeder up, I would have moved that feeder down the shelf away from where those fish are feeding. Because you've got to imagine that my feeder's landing against the banking, that's when my bait's getting emptied out, then I'm moving the feeder away from that, I'm defeating the whole object of what I'm trying to achieve. So by doing the principle of what I've just explained, it'll help you catch loads more fish, especially when you're casting next to an island. And it's such an enjoyable way and extremely effective. But there's many areas that you could do wrong and not achieve that principle. So hopefully with those notes and those points that I've just gone through, go out and practice them and you'll definitely catch more fish. Well, there we have it. What a fantastic day's fishing on a simple amount of bait as well. A nice simple approach, one rod, and an absolutely brilliant day's fishing. So I hope you've enjoyed the video and all the tips to go with it. And hopefully I'll see you soon.